All right, we're ready to go. Here we go.
Here we go. When he says here we go, start it.
All right, the break times around here sound like a Jewish riot.
We need it silent.
Right. All right, so we'll get ready here for the journey from Caesarea to Malta. And we got the Malta expert here. You can tell us all about the island here when we get to it. All right. Did they have malts there?
What's that?
At Malta, did they have malts?
Malt. I had Maltesers.
Okay. All right. That's all for you.
Well, today.
All right, when 27:1. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, where Rome is, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius. Now we have a new character here, Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band. This would be Augustus Caesar, so he would be highly ranked official for Caesar. After an indefinite amount of days, which length Luke did not care to reveal, he began to record the dangerous but prosperous journey of Paul to Italy, AD 58. The writer included himself in the voyage since he used the first person plural pronoun we 18 times, us 4 times, and our 2 times throughout the narrative. As a passenger, Luke recorded places, weather, and nautical terms, vividly describing the exciting adventure. The main purpose of the account was to demonstrate the providential protection of the Lord to fulfill his promise to Paul about the eventual arrival of the apostle at Rome. Certainly the truth of the promise of Jehovah was fulfilled in this sea voyage, who said, "When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee." So Isaiah 43 may have been a verse they looked at often. All right, so here, this was a prosperous journey for Paul, but it was also a prosperous journey for Luke. Now think of these two individuals in the prosperous journey. Luke wasn't under threat like Paul, but what was the Lord's will for Paul? Well, we have seen so much of that. But since Luke was on the journey, Paul's prosperous journey, this became Luke's prosperous journey as well. And his role really was to record the events. That was God's will for him. See, so he has a different will for everybody. So somebody said, Paul was the perfect man for the prosperous journey. That's because it was his prosperous journey. And you're the perfect person for the Lord's prosperous journey for you. Nobody else can fulfill it. So we can learn from this. If we will walk with the Lord, he'll give us a prosperous journey. As a believer, the prosperous journey will take us ultimately to heaven. And we want to go to heaven in obedience, obeying the Lord. So he's got a prosperous journey for all of us. It's not just, there is unlucky Paul, No, he's not unlucky, number one. But he's got his prosperous journey, you've got yours. So, and we notice here, in the difficulties of your prosperous journey, who is with you? The Lord. The Lord's with you. All right, so anyway, Luke gave the necessary initial details about the beginning of the voyage, saying first, and when it was determined that we should sail into Italy. All right, so indefiniteness about the time continued with the anonymity of the authorities. The main principles at this point were the prisoner Paul and the Roman officer Julius. These are the two big characters on this journey. The narrator continues saying they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners under one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band. All right, so next page. The unnamed officials were available to determine the number of days before sailing and the specifics of which criminals would be going to Rome. King Agrippa gave the command to Festus to send Paul to Nero. The factors on the timing included a large ship going to Italy with the mandated prisoners required to go. Since the passenger ships were a rarity in the ancient world, travelers desiring to sail needed to wait for the next vessel going their way. These trips were slow, usually sailing in daylight with few exceptions since the night travel would be only by the stars. Locomotion was by sail or oar. Later, Luke noted that 276 people, including sailors, soldiers, prisoners, were on board and salvaged later in the wrecked wheat ship later on. So that would include Paul, Aristarchus, and Luke, along with the 276 people. So this is a large ship with a large group. So you have the soldiers there, you got the sailors, you got the prisoners. So majority of them would probably be the prisoners. Included along with Paul were his personal physician Luke and his personal assistant Aristarchus. Large ship was headed to Italy, not Rome. One Julius, a centurion of the Roman military unit of 600 legionnaires, was in charge. He was a member of the bodyguard unit of Caesar Nero, or of the band, the cohortus. And apparently Julius was returning to Rome with only a portion of legionnaires. Obviously, he didn't have all 600 on there. All right. Now, in this section, I've looked at several books. They'll come up here a little bit later on, which were absolutely intriguing. For instance, on page 1790, footnote, page 1790, we have one man, William Falconer, wrote a dissertation on St. Paul's voyage from Caesarea to Petulio, there in Italy, and on Apostles' shipwreck on the island. So a lot of interesting things there. Then on the next page, and I obtained these books, but on the next page is down at the bottom, 1791, Lionel Casson, Ships and Seamanship in the Ancient World. So he did research. He's probably the expert on ships and seamanship in the ancient world. He talked about a lot of different things. And he brought in things that were recorded by Luke in this chapter that he confirmed with regard to the secular world and so on. So, we're not saying he's the authority on everything that happened to Acts, but he is an authority on ancient seamanship and ships and so on. So very, very interesting. Several pages over is another man, page 1793, Cecil Tour, his book on ancient ships, coming out of Cambridge back in 1895. So these were some of the interesting books that I obtained as I just tried to visualize. So they had many pictures and so on. So they're not the final authority on this, but they are a secular authority on the ancient world marine life. So it brings it to life. It brought it to life to me anyway. So 27:2, and entered into the ship of Adramyttium. We launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. So now Paul has Luke and Aristarchus on the journey. So these three men. To transport the prisoners for greater security, Festus chose to place them on a grain ship heading back to its original port in Mysia. The wheat ship may have been hired out by the Roman Imperial Navy, since the centurion Julius had the final say in decision making. And after all, he's right underneath Caesar, so if he wants this grain ship for his purposes, he's got it. Luke reported saying, and entering to the ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coast, all right? Next page. Paul and the others boarded the ship from the city of Adramyttium and departed from Caesarea Maritima to go to Myra and Lycia. From Myra, they would have to debark and find another ship to embark towards Italy. So there's a total of 3 ships for him to get to Italy. The Lord worked so that the prisoner Paul had 2 Christian companions, namely his personal physician and his personal assistant or co-prisoner, Aristarchus. So how does this work out? Luke gets to go along, and then another Christian as well. So here we have 3 that are going. And by the way, Paul's prosperous journey was also the prosperous journey for Aristarchus, at least in this leg of his life. A Macedonia of Thessalonica. So remember when he's back there at Thessalonica, started the church there 3 weeks, has to leave and all that. And somewhere along the line, Aristarchus got saved and said, I want to follow this man named Paul. And realizing there are many dangers. He didn't even know what he's talking about at this point. Many more coming along. So we get the idea through this whole section here is that Paul was highly favored by the leadership, the officials and so on. He seemed to be highly favored through all of this. He was a special man. There's something unusual about him. What was he? More than being a Jew, a Christian, a Roman, he's a spirit-filled man who demonstrated Christ in his life. And they may not have been able to assess that in any way, but nevertheless, he was a godly man, and they probably had never run into somebody like this. And of course, he was in the Lord's will. All right, next page. While the ship moved from harbor to harbor, Paul, Luke, and Aristarchus could have fellowship around the scriptures along with singing and praying. So what do you think they did there? Footnotes 61 and 86, the historian Luke never revealed how the voyages at sea were financed by Paul and his team. Of course, he was going with the Roman help, but these 2 other men, were they all taken care of by the Romans as well? The reader is forced to believe the reality of Paul's promise in the Philippians, but God shall supply all your need. All right, the next day we touched in Sidon. So they're still going up the coast from Caesarea to Sidon. And Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. So he gets off the ship. What in the world? And go see his friends. Is this in the Bible? Yeah, this is what was happening. The Lord was taking care of him. So think of this blessing. As the ancient wayfaring ships would do, they traveled from coastal port to coastal port. Luke acknowledged this practice in his captain's log, saying, the next day we touched at Sidon. Because of the loading and unloading of the cargo would take some time, the soldiers and prisoners would have an extended layover. Luke observed a significant detail about the person of Paul and his relationship with Julius. So now remember, soldiers and prisoners, soldiers would be guarding the prisoners, but not Paul. He could go to the local church there. So Luke observed a significant detail about the person of Paul and his relationship with Julius. And Julius courteously entreated Paul. So here we see he had this love for him. So the word there, courteously entreated, the adverb here, philanthropos, love of a man, is a Lucan hapax legomena, which means literally human love or kindly. Governor Felix showed humane treatment to Paul as well. The English word philanthropy comes from this source. So we see how the Lord was working in Julius's heart because Julius ultimately was the one who gave Paul the prisoner to get his own rented house once he got to Rome. All right, so this relationship was here at the beginning, and we see how it will just be enhanced through the trip. All right, so the other thing is, back down to footnote 6187, I mentioned this before, but here's our katekeo verb here, which means to sound down against. So the next day we touched Sidon, or they sounded the depth of the dock and soil. So I mentioned all that. All right, next page. Why did Julius act so kindly to the prisoner Paul, who obviously was not chained and allowed to go ashore to be with the Christians of the Sidon Baptist Church? Was Julius a member of the audience in the Agrippa hearing? See, he might have been. And then received Christ as Savior? Was he a God seeker? We don't know, but certainly he had a fond relationship towards Paul. So I think in the Bible, in the New Testament, we find out people either loved Paul or hated him. Nobody's neutral. But here's an unsaved man, we assume, at this point. Since he was the legal authority overseeing the escort of Paul to Nero, remember he's a Roman prisoner and wants to go to see Caesar, so Julius has to consider, will he run away and I lose my charge? He didn't seem to have a problem with that. So could he? So since he's legal authority overseeing the escort of Paul Nero, did he recognize that he could trust this Christian prisoner to be set at liberty and visit other Christians? Apparently he could. And he did. Certainly the psalmist's declaration is apropos. He made them also to be pitied of all those that carried them captives. So the psalmist here talks about believers who had been pitied by those who carried them as captives in some situation. Nevertheless, Paul had the liberty to meet with Baptists and minister to them as they ministered to him. Presumably Luke and Aristarchus accompanied the apostle and enjoyed the fellowship, physical and spiritual refreshing, and perhaps even financial benevolence. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed. So here the we. Under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary, and when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. So if you remember, Paul and Barnabas went to Cyprus because Barnabas was from Cyprus. All right, now he sees that again. So now they're crossing the sea. Again, Luke did not report the time interval on land, but continued the narrative about the travel. So he mentions this. Next page. Earlier, when Paul headed back to Jerusalem to preach at the Pentecost festival, his ship sailed from Patara to Tyre with the westerly winds to the south of Cyprus. The provisional blowing of the wind affected the timing and stops for Paul and his missionary team. These believers recognized the truth that David averred, saying, "He restoreth my soul, he leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake." The nautical detail in Luke's inspired report revealed that he was a keen eyewitness on his journeys with Paul. Obviously, the physician historian did not receive oral tradition and unknown written sources for his account, contrary to the contention of some Bible critics. All right, so I won't bore you with their names at this point. Now, according to the narrator, the route of the ship was northeast of Cyprus, moving along the coast of Cilicia, thereby confirming the previous interpretation of under Cyprus. He revealed, saying, and when they had sailed over the sea of Sicily and Pamphylia, they came to Myra, a city of Lycia. So the distance from Sidon to Myra was about 400 nautical miles, 1.1 miles, right? What?
1.15.
Oh yeah, 1.1.
105, is it?
1.15.
Yeah. All right. Got that down. Test question. All right. So the distance of Sidon to Myra was about 400 nautical miles and could have taken a mere 4 days to sail. However, with uncertain winds, the ship may have had to lay over at various ports along the southern shores of the provinces of Sicilia and Pamphylia. Intermediate time on the ship eventually ended with the ship reaching the major seaport of Myra. Here Julius needed to find passage for his large group on sail onto Crete and then Malta and eventually Petulio. All right, so would it be possible to put the map back up? So it just gives you a basic idea of this. That's the back row, that's for sure. You doing okay?
That's pretty good, actually.
We'll turn it on soon. All right.
If it takes too long to say.
All right, here we go. All right, yeah. There's some of the prisoners.
But who's the chief? Who's the chief?
All right, here we go. Thank you. All right.
Wait there. No, that's not.
That's not the
That's
right.
not the right one.
Yeah, right, yeah. But anyway, so here, so they're Sidon, and then Pamphylia. They're heading for Pamphylia. So here's Cyprus. So in this case, they go over or around Cyprus on the north east side, go around that way. And so then they're heading over to Myra. There's Myra over there. And then they're going to get in trouble in this storm as they go south eventually here. So, yeah. And so there's Crete. There's Crete and then Fair Havens. All right, Fair Havens. Baptist Bible College right there. All right, then over here to Greece and so on. So anyway. All right, so anyway, you got a general idea, all right? So you got a general idea? Okay, so that's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there you go. And so, I'm done with it. You can. Yeah, so anyway. So we're in 27:6. So, and there the centurions found the ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. So Egypt was known for her grain. And in the days of Joseph and following, Egypt supplied Rome with grain and transported by ship this precious stable from Alexandria, that's northern Egypt, to the ports of Italy, especially Puteoli. At Myra, the centurion needed to obtain passage for all going to Rome. The officers, soldiers, prisoners, and missionaries all needed to disembark the first ship from Sidon and then embark the next ship going to Italy. Luke informed the reader saying, and there the centurion found the ship. All right. Obviously, the Alexandrian grain ship was large and could hold the additional 176 men. One ancient writer revealed that the dimensions of one certain grain ship, about AD 150, were 180 feet long, about 43 and a half feet wide, with the depth of about the same dimension as width. Likewise, Luke even recorded how he and the others stepped on the deck of the ship and embarking for the long trip. All right. So, and when we had sailed slowly many days and scarcely were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete over against Salmone. So under Crete means on the side where the wind wasn't blowing here. So hardly passing it, came unto a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh unto whereunto was the city of Lycia. All right. Now, once on board and starting the next leg of the journey, the physician narrated the agonizing voyage. As the doctor, Luke may have had to administer medical help to those on board from time to time. Nevertheless, he gave more details about the challenges and ports, saying, first, and when we had sailed slowly many days and scarce come under the over against Cnidus. About 130 miles from Myra, Cnidus was an important commercial port and housed a famous medical school. The inhabitants worshipped Aphrodite, the goddess of the sea, of sex and the sea. Luke continued about the contrary westerly winds, recording their challenging effort of the Aegean Sea. All right, having gone along the shoreline of Asia Minor as long as possible, the ship left the protection of Cnidus and could not sail westward any longer. The crew then directed the ship and sailed south and westward toward Cape Salmonia on the eastern side of Crete, but sailed past the harbor and under the protection of the promontory of Salmone. The expert sailors had to negotiate the prevailing winds with great skill to avoid disaster, which of course prevented anticipated nautical advance and occasioned wasted time. Luke continued in his nautical logbook describing the challenges of the sailors in navigating through the waters against strong winds. It says, hardly passing, it came to a place where it was called Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lycia. All right, on the southern side of Crete, there were two adjoining bays, Fair Havens and Lycia, that offered some protection. Of course, the two harbors were open to the Mediterranean Sea, but the ship anchored at the suitable port with the appropriate name, the Fair Havens. All right. Now, in verses 9 and 10. Now, when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous because the fast had already passed, Paul admonished them and said to them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only the lading of the ship, but also of our lives. Anchored in the bay of the Fair Havens, the frustrated crew recognized the precariousness of wintering up in this open harbor. The summer sailing was over, and now the journey of the ship was facing the predicament of autumn sailing. The crew and the passengers were completely under control of the weather. Luke continued to agonize about the terrible sailing weather, giving drama to his nautical account. He divulged about the situation, says when time was spent and the fast was passed. All right, so next page talks more about this. The weather had stymied the mariners so much that the ship was in an unfavorable location bay, Fair Havens, and had entered into a dangerous sailing season, winter. Luke, the Gentile writer, referred to the Jewish holy day, Yom Kippur, knowing the teaching of the Tanakh, which commanded also on the 10th day of the 7th month shall be the day of atonement. So Yom Kippur is the day of atonement. All right, so this since the fast had already passed, the sailing season had ended. The calendar, September, October, from which the Jewish perspective prohibited safe sea travel. So here they're in September, September or late September, early October. And so sailing after this became dangerous. Presumably the ship to Adramyttium left Caesarea in late summer. Eventually the second ship stalled at the Fair Havens in early October, wrecked later, and finally Paul and his colleagues arrived in Italy around AD 59 or 60, so I'm jumping ahead on all that. The medical officer of the ship informed about Paul's response. Paul admonished them and said, I perceive this voyage will be with hurt and much damage. All right, so all right, next page. So, however, he had many experiences on open waters, as he had testified in the Corinthian Baptist Church. He said, thrice I suffered shipwreck. Now, this is written before when he wrote to Corinth. So this is past history. A night and a day I had been in the deep. He knew by experience the potential of recklessness by sea captains who risked all to gain wealth from the deliverance of the cargo. Paul did not want to experience shipwreck number 4. So can you imagine floating around in the ocean at nighttime and not knowing what would be nibbling at your toes or anything else? I mean, that'd be a fearsome thing in and of itself. Therefore, the Apostle Paul spoke from his experience to the ship leaders, exhorting them to reconsider the reckless plan. Remember, it's all about money. It's all about the cargo. Inevitably, there would be hurt from the pride of the crew and great loss to the enormous cargo and to the ship and even to the personnel. Significant was the ordering of the items of potential loss, since Paul knew the heart of the crew that was willing to risk human life for monetary gain of the lading. Financial greed outplays safety need. All right, a little bumper stick or slogan there, all right? Verse 11. Oh, yeah. Question?
Sir, would you recommend reading the Ramsey, St. Paul, the Traveler?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think, I mentioned that. St. Paul the Traveler, yeah.
Would you recommend reading him? Because I haven't read him.
Yeah, right. In fact, I think he can quote that. The great fast fell. Okay. Yeah, so he's got a lot of good historical, biblical information there. Yeah. It's kind of a classic work.
Right. Yeah.
Ramsey, okay, yeah.
So it would be good to read.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, verse 11. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. So, of course, Paul's a mere prisoner, right? But he was a significant prisoner. Paul, a man of prayer and of life experiences, recognized the obvious dangers of the weather and the recklessness of greedy and haughty men. He did not need a heavenly vision to know the prudent decision to make. Later, he rebuked the military and marine mariners leaders for their insolence. The resident narrator observed the scenario, saying, nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than the things which were spoken of. So the centurion believed the master and owner of the ship. And the centurion of the Imperial Roman army had the final word with regard to decision-making concerning the Alexandrian ship. Julius was the ultimate leader of the hierarchy of the ship's command, including leadership over the helmsman, master, and a charter owner of the ship. It was important for the centurion to deliver the needy grain and the necessary prisoners to Rome as early in the spring as possible. Whether the ship was part of the imperial fleet or the hired out charter, Julius made the final determination. He counseled with the crew leaders and received their recommendation. The helmsman was the navigational expert. The harbor of Phoenix was more conducive for wintering, and the charter was a calculating risk. Consequently, Julius rejected Paul's counsel. And because of the haven was not commodious to the winter in the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenice, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, and lieth towards the southwest of the northwest. So Luke gave more detail of the human reasoning behind the decision of the military marine leaders. Probably the prayers to their gods and goddesses of the sea, namely Roman deity Neptune and our Greek deity Poseidon, coupled with their greedy timing necessity and supposed advantageous harbor, the men agreed to risk the 40 nautical miles of Phoenice. So remember, they had their own deities. So you have to ask, when the storm came, where was Neptune? Where was Neptune when you needed him? All right. So the biblical historian reported their logic and then their location. First, he revealed, saying, because the haven was not commodious to the winter, Fair Haven. Although Fair Havens was a suitable bay, it was nevertheless open to the Mediterranean Sea and not acceptable for the winter winds. The collective decision was to sail to a better harbor that offered more protection from the fierce winds and raging waves of the ocean. The best of human logic is fallible without the leading of the Lord. Second, Luke stated about the location, saying, if by any means they might attain to Phoenice, there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest. All right, so Paul had been outvoted as if he had a vote, and the ship hierarchy decided to travel a mere 40 miles to a more advantageous port. This other location had two bays on the southern promontory of Crete, lying southwest and northwest in the horseshoe configuration. The bay closest to the village of Phoenice was the choice of the sailors. So here they're going to try to make that trip. And so tomorrow we'll find out about how this turns out. So we'll stop at this point. So you might want to bring your seasick pills.